All right. For this assignment, the book that I chose to read was The Next Worship, Glorifying God in a Diverse World, written by Sandra Maria Van Opstal. But the topic of this book is about what worship looks like in communities that are becoming more and more diverse. Um, and becoming more multicultural. As the church continues to grow and we as a people continue to grow, our church continues to grow and become different and diverse and different cultures, which is kind of what her book is about. And it's about how do we do that? How do we incorporate these different cultures in our own worship services? What does that really look like to us? And what do we need to do to incorporate those kind of things? Some of the author's main points have to do. She ties a lot of her symbolism into food, and kind of gathering at a table and what that looks like as different cultures come to a table and gather and share a meal together. The author uses Luke chapter 14 to kind of demonstrate her point, that all are welcomed into the presence of God. In Luke 14, God calls all of his people to himself, and then he calls us to one another to take care of each other, to seek each other, to be with each other, to learn from one another. And she talks about this idea that worship is being a cross cultural experience. Um, the author talks about a time there she visited and went to Swaziland, which is cool because I've been to Swaziland as well. And she was able to learn what worship sounded like and looked like out there, which broadened her scope and kind of broadened her view of what other cultures look like when they are doing their own worship services and what their songs are like, how they dance, how they react, what they do. It's pretty cool. She makes a point that as Christians, as we continue to connect with one another and learn from one another, we are experiencing God together. We encounter God together, which is pretty cool. We are fellowshipping with one another. We are praising the same God, just in different ways. It's still the same God, no matter what our worship looks like and their worship looks like. We're still worshiping the same God. And that we just need to learn from each other that yes, things may look different, but we're still worshiping the same God who still died for us. She talks about coming together at a dinner table, being and feeling a little bit awkward of not knowing all these different cultures and how they act and how they treat each other, or how they worship God and all these different things, how it can feel awkward. And some of the main reasons that it feels awkward is a couple things. She says that it's our lack of exposure. A lot of times we get into our little bubble, what's comfortable to us. And when something is different, it freaks us out and we don't want to be a part of something necessarily. Another part of it is that we make decisions based on our own preferences, what we're comfortable with. Same kind of thing of us being in a bubble of what we're used to, and even fear of what it looks like to be different and step out and learn something new. And sometimes when we learn something new, it challenges us and kind of makes us think about what we do. So sometimes it's fear based that we're kind of a little worried about what it may change to our thoughts and how we do certain situations and how we act. Along with preferences, that we make a lot of our decisions based on what's comfortable to us. And I completely agree. Like when I moved here to San Antonio from San Diego, when we were looking for new churches, we looked for a church that was similar to like what we had in San Diego. We looked for the certain type of music, the type of preaching, the type of congregation. We just looked for what was comfortable to us. And we found a church that our first church that we attended that wasn't comfortable to us, that was different, and we tried it, and we found out it wasn't for us, and we kept looking, and we found the church that God wanted us to go to, which is pretty cool. And it is different than what we grew up with in San Diego, so it broadened our horizon. We were afraid to do something different, but it ended up working out really well. The author also speaks about contextualization, about knowing about the community that we are in as future leaders and worship leaders and pastors, that where we are, who we speak to, who we sing with, should be dependent on the community that we are in. That what works in one part of the country is not going to necessarily work in the other part of the country, and we need to be aware of that, that we need to know what our community is. We need to know their struggles. We need to know what's going on politically, socially, economically. We need to know what the community is that we are in, so when we are building worship services and when we are worshiping God, we are aware of what's going on and we can tie to the community. The learning that impacted me very specifically is I feel like I haven't been exposed to to a lot of different cultures. I grew up in San Diego, and now we're in San Antonio for the past few years, where it's a lot of white and Hispanic. And that's just what I've grown up with. Those are the cultures that I know. When I went to Africa, got some exposure. I got 2 weeks of that, which was really cool, and I got to learn a lot and see how people are grateful and thankful for what they have. But I haven't been exposed to a lot of culture. And I think that really impacted me, that I feel like I'm in a bubble too much, and that I need to really figure out what it means to learn from other cultures. I need to step outside my comfort zones and my boundaries and really figure out what that looks like, and talk to more people and learn from other cultures, generations, how they approach God and the wisdom they have, or whatever it may be, and just kind of be aware of what that looks like. As a future leader in the church, I need to expose myself. That really impacted me. And when I was in Swaziland as well, I got to worship with other people out there. And with that worship, it was different, because sometimes here, when I'm singing, sometimes I'm not bought in, and I'm just kind of going through the routine of singing worship. But when I was in Swaziland, these people who had nothing else, the only thing they had was their hope in Jesus. That they were dancing, they were free, and that these worship songs that they were singing were so impactful and so meaningful in their life. And it really does open you up to think, like, man, like, I'm just taking all of this for granted. And I think just a big takeaway is I need more exposure to different cultures and societies. Another takeaway that I thought was really cool that the author talked about was that worship is also a form of outreach. When we're plugged into the communities that God is calling us to go into, we have an opportunity to learn from them and talk to them, see what the issues are, to learn how they handle certain situations, what the age group is, what the culture is, is it a mush pot, is it a specific culture, and really designing our worship and our church services around that specific culture within the community that we are partaking in, and trying to help win people over for the Lord. If we're not taking the culture into effect, into consideration, then what are we doing? We're not making an impact. If people aren't comfortable where we are, if we're not resonating with the people there, then we're not going to be as impactful as we could be. So I think just exposure is huge. Like the first takeaway, and then second is that worship is a form of outreach, of just getting to know the community, and just getting really to be around them.